sustainable innovation and in social impact and inclusive design, we can thread through how they lead with purpose. And so to briefly introduce Tania Flynn, VP of Apparel and Product Design at Nike, has been with Nike over 17 years, is leading incredible work. Is going to talk with us today about some new innovation that's driving incredible environmental impact and circularity, and also her work working with great partnerships such as Serena Williams and the design crew. I'm here with Aurora James, founder of Brother Vellies, and also 15% Pledge, CFDA member, and also just named named by Glamour as Women of the Year. And last year by the CFDA, Eleanor Lambert's Founders Award, and by Time as one of the 100 most influential people. And the incredible and amazing Tracy Reese, who's been a member of the CFDA for 30 years, is on our board of directors. Her namesake brand has been worn by Michelle Obama, Tracy Ellis Ross, Oprah, and in 2019 made an incredible shift in sharing time between Detroit, New York, founding Hope for Flowers. So coming from Portland, from Los Angeles, from New York via Detroit, we're so happy to be here today. And just to kick off, I think, before we get into conversation, I'd like to just ask each of you to share a little bit more about the work that you're currently leading in each of your roles. Tania.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I lead the Nike Apparel Design organization, and you know, the work is really meaningful to me. As you've said, I've been there almost 18 years now, and there was a moment for me, probably about 10 years ago, where the way that I approached my work at first was about creating beautiful things, right? We're all creatives and want to make the world, you know, this beautiful place. It really shifted to thinking about my purpose and how my work really started to align with my purpose, especially when I went into roles like leading our kids team, and you think about creating a better future. Like Stuart, I really resonate when you think about children, and it really does put a different perspective on the way that you view what you're leaving behind for the future. And then leading the women's team, and really thinking about how to create more equity, whether it's in a diversity space, whether it's pay equity in sport, whether it is body inclusivity. And it's just been so wonderful to be able to marry the work that I do with my own personal purpose.
Amazing. Thank you. Aurora?
Yeah, so I started my brand Brother Vellies with $3,500 at a flea market in Manhattan's Lower East Side. And a lot of you guys don't know this, but I think I've gone through more CFDA programs than anybody else. And thank God. And Sara, I just want to give a special shout out to you because you've been an incredible ally to me in very early days when I was talking about sustainability and everyone was like, what? And you were right there with me leading the charge. And Stephen and Lee and Sasha and all of these incredible people at the CFDA, because there's so many of us that would not be here without you guys. So I just want to give a second to really say thank you for that, because that allyship is so important to young designers. Give it up, seriously, guys. And so I really started my brand with the sole purpose of supporting artisans around the world. So we work in South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Mali, Bali, Haiti, Mexico, and also right here in America. And so it was really about this idea of how can we create beautiful things in a really beautiful way, right? And really re-examining the idea of what it means to have a luxury product. And for me, I had to think about it in my own world, right? I'm someone who's always loved fashion. Fashion's made me feel great. I've also used it as a tool to escape in my mind and have a vivid imagination, looking at Tim Walker photos and all that jazz, flipping through Vogues. I'm sure you guys have all been there. And I really wanted to say, how can I create a brand that really empowers women, where they're buying things because they feel great about themselves and they feel represented and they feel included, and then our supply chain also speaks to that, right? And we're actually uplifting people every time we make a transaction. We're really voting with our dollars. So that's really been the impetus behind Brother Vellies. And then, you know, continuing on with the 15% Pledge, which I launched in 2020, which is a call to action for major retailers to commit 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. And again, you know, it was really the same proposition as Brother Vellies, to be honest with you, Sara, because it was really about taking groups that have historically not had access and saying, hey, why don't you guys actually pay attention to these groups over here? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but actually it's more interesting, it's more innovative, and it's really phenomenal business that actually also makes customers really happy. So I'm just so happy that both of these theses that are so connected have turned out to be really wonderful for all of us and exciting and fun.
And you are already driving, I think, $10 billion in revenue through 15% pledge.
Yeah, so it's $10 billion in annual revenue. Thank you.
And Tracy.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and thank you, Sara. And I echo what Aurora said. You know, when I did the CFDA Lexus Fashion Fund, or Fashion Initiative, it was life-changing for me, and definitely a huge change for my business. So I'm the veteran on the stage. I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I launched my first brand in 1987 with investment from my dad. And he just believed in me and kind of funneled money to me like every month so that I could make my samples and produce my collection. And I was blessed to get picked up by like Barney's and Bergdorf and a lot of stores from the beginning. And that was a tremendous start for me, but it didn't last long. 18 months later, I was out of business, living hand to mouth. And I was just young. I was like 23 years old and didn't know everything and had to grow as a person and a business person in order to start again. But my second business was much more successful. And, you know, we were in it for about 20 some odd years. And I'm proud to say it was the first Black woman who had a business over $30 million in the United States in the fashion industry. But in 2018, I just felt like I could do better, and I was learning so much through the initiative, and it had always been my goal to learn how to work more responsibly. And it's not that we were working so terribly in the past, but we didn't have an intention to work more sustainably. And that's when I decided to launch Hope for Flowers. I had other business partners in my previous business. Hope for Flowers is my own. I can make all the bottom line decisions myself. And as a woman and as a woman of color, that's incredibly important because I can choose to compensate my team the way that I feel they deserve to be compensated. I can write the book of how we exist in the world. And I knew that I wanted to have a business that wasn't just a commercial enterprise, but was also adding value to my community. So we also have, you know, a social mission. And I decided to launch that business in Detroit, which is my hometown, because I see so much opportunity at home. And I see so much work that can be done in so many ways that I can add value and my team can add value. And I wanted to train Detroiters to do this work alongside me. I wanted to work in a community of wonderful creatives and collaborate with them on product for the collection. But I also wanted to give opportunities to young people. So as part of our mission, we have art enrichment for young people on Saturdays. So we have free classes for Detroit Public School children. I always had classes as a child. My mom had me in classes every Saturday, and that's where I found myself. And I want young people to have those same opportunities. We also do adults on Thursday nights, and that is a community exercise of people coming together to be creative, you know, and it's community building. You know, everything from book binding to painting to jewelry making. We have little groups ages 18 to 90 sitting together and creating. And we do workshops around sustainability because it's important, especially in urban spaces, that we give people agency to be a part of living more sustainably. It can't be an elitist concept, sustainability, and it's a very misused word, but we all have to be a part of creating a better future for ourselves and the next generations. So it's been my privilege to be able to launch this third brand and do it in a way that I feel can add value to my community and hopefully the world.
It's amazing. Really amazing. And so much resilience and courage and just vision in its most purity, hearing the work that Tracy, Tania, and Aurora are leading every day. For the sake of the next 30 minutes, we'll define sustainability, just a level set, as looking through the lens of environmental, social, and financial or economic. And I think we all agree you can't have one without the other, meaning that in order to really make true impactful environmental change with all of today's urgencies around climate, with waste, you have to have resources. You have to have financial resources to accomplish that. And when we talk about innovation, I think a lot of us immediately think about technology, and we should, and science, and how innovation is really, I think, the act of identifying a challenge and sort of driving towards a solution, finding ways to make progress, finding ways to improve whatever that challenge and that landscape is. But it's also very much about people, social innovation. Can't say enough about, and I think it resonates in all of the work that we just heard about, how important it is to innovate in your community, in your culture, and with your teams through collaboration. That's not easy, however, just as financial barriers are very challenging. I think navigating everything around us today, all that we've been through collectively, all that we've been through individually is tremendous. And so I think maybe to hear from each of you, you make it look easy, but it's not. It's so hard. And I think it would be great to hear from you and tell us a little bit about if you can identify any key challenges, any hurdles that come to mind, and how you've really navigated through that and overcome that. Maybe back to you, Tracy.
I think, it's interesting making the case for working sustainably in fashion, making the financial case for it, because it is challenging. And I think there are so many systems in place that are, we've been working within for dozens of years, and it's hard to dismantle those. Yeah. And sometimes it's very challenging to make the case of paying a living wage to construct garments. But I think, especially as Americans, we have to look at the value that we place on clothing. And I think fast fashion has impacted that very negatively, and the fact that we make very little in the US has impacted that negatively. When the person who's making your clothes is thousands of miles away and you're not, confronted with their quality of life on a day-to-day basis, then it's easy to say, oh, I bought this for $30 and I wore it once and I tossed it aside. And I can't believe we've developed that attitude that, as a people, as Americans, we dispose of 70% of our clothing after less than 6 wears. That's unconscionable, and I always equate this to, how houses are built. I have a very old house that has hardly any closets in it. And 100 years ago, people didn't have closets full of items, and today you watch like HGTV and young couples looking for a house and they want a giant walk-in closet. And it's filled with cheap sneakers and t-shirts and, hundreds of items that they can't possibly be wearing. And people used to buy less and value what they had more. And we also cared for our clothing. We did a mending workshop recently in Detroit because it's a skill that's kind of been lost. Putting a button back on, putting a hem back up, mending a rip, and a loved piece, So we want to encourage people to buy quality, buy less, love it more. Buy something that you love that just lights you up, that, you get compliments wearing, not something that, is just a whim or an impulse purchase that you're going to cast aside very shortly. So we have to elevate the craft of making clothing, whether it's someone here in the United States or someone in China or India or Bangladesh. This is a craft. It requires talent. It requires years of experience, to create a well-made garment. And we have to have respect for that. We have to have respect for making, and we have to value the items that we have. And I think until we can really transmit that message very clearly to current generations and young people. It's going to be very difficult to pay a living wage to a garment worker. When we do the math, if I'm paying someone $15 an hour up to $25 an hour, I'm making a garment that's going to retail for $2,000 easy. You know what I mean? And it's like, how do we bridge the financial gap where sustainability and the social part of that, which is respect for people and the hands and the supply chain and the artisans, how do we bridge that gap? And it's going to take some time. It's going to take training. We have to become expert at what we're doing. But it's up to all of us to spread that message and kind of change our habits, and really value the choices that we make and the people that contribute to making all these beautiful things.
So beautifully said, Tracy, and value is, I think, one of the other most important drivers. It has to be a complete paradigm shift, and some could say we're in a value crisis, but I think there's also, through any crisis, a tremendous opportunity for what comes next and the transformation and the power. Tania, in your work, I know, and Tracy, you're speaking a lot about working with education and working to support emerging talent. And Tania, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about some of the ways that you're tackling hurdles in industry with your work at Nike.
Yeah, sure. We believe at Nike that diversity fuels curiosity. Curiosity is the gateway to innovation, and we know that we use innovation to tackle climate change and how we are more sustainable as a brand. And when I think back over kind of my own barriers in entering the industry, was believing there was space for someone in an environment that didn't reflect me, and that there was space for me to show up authentically as I was and not be valued just for the talents that I had or the skills that I had, but the way in which I showed up as well. And it's really important, right, to create that space for others. And the work that we do with Serena Williams' design crew is, partnering with the GOAT herself. And this is also a personal purpose of hers, right, is to bringing more diverse voices into the room. And so we partner with Serena and do a 6-month fellowship program with kind of emergent designers that don't come from a traditional educational background, right? That may be a barrier for them, right? Going to, a private art school or having all of those traditional resources. And really bring them in, work with them, and we learn as much from them as they learn from us, right? And it's amazing. We're about to start cohort 4, year 4 of this program, and we've employed about 75% of the participants in the program. They're full-time, Nike employees.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Aurora, I know, every day you're tackling something even bigger and more amazing. Can you share with us a little bit about how you've been approaching your mindset and how you've been approaching all of the incredible milestones you continue to achieve and the barriers you break down?
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me, just even having this conversation and being on this stage, right? Like, the fashion industry actually employs a lot of women of color around the world, mostly in sweatshops, right? So I think
80% of garment
Right.
workers across the world.
Right. And so, at my nonprofit, we spend a lot of time kind of talking to any big company about, like, how do you holistically support and empower people of color, right? Like, not just with the amount of models on the runway, but also in your corporate sector and then also in your workshop, right? Because it's very important. And sometimes, what we've been seeing oftentimes is people will come to us and they'll be like, okay, we have great news. 40% of the models in our campaign for fall are Black. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, that's amazing. Like, how many Black board members do you have? And they're like, oh, So, but it's okay, because this is actually a great problem to have, because the learning is right there in the numbers. Because we know that if they want to put Black people in their campaigns, right, they see a benefit to that. Consumers like that, right? People like that. So why not actually just start involving communities more holistically, right? That's innovative. So it's just about doing the work and figuring out top to bottom, how can we fix this? Because at the end of the day, right, like everyone wants to feel connected. Everyone wants to feel like we're making progress. And, you know, a lot of people would say that we aren't. I believe we're making tons of progress. I really do. And it's easy to get bogged down and feel like, oh, it's so hard. Some of these things are so insurmountable, especially when we talk about climate change. Guys, it's not true. A lot of the answers are right in front of us. We just need to communicate about things. We need to get on the same page, and we need to push forward, right? And we need to invest in the problem solvers, right? And the organizations and the people and the ideas and the clothes, the products that we want to see really win. And then I just have one question for you guys, if you don't mind. I would love all of you guys in the audience just to think about some of your favorite products, okay? And then I would love to see, again, if you don't mind, a show of hands on how many of you guys would love to see your favorite products made as sustainably as possible. And look around, it's a lot of you guys. Keep your hands up, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. And now, how many of you guys would be willing to pay a little bit more for those products? Right. So I think it's just about understanding, A, we're all in this. We're all ready and willing to do it. We just need to make sure that everyone else knows that and listens to us as consumers, and that we start making those investments now. Whether it's about fashion being made in America or made sustainably elsewhere, retailers focusing on products that are made in America, all of that, because we want it, and we're excited about it, and we're shopping it, and we're gonna shop it even more, and that's what the data says.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you for putting your hands up, guys. I appreciated that. We always love an informal survey. I'm a data girl.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's incredible that I think 5%, outside of apparel for a moment, I think only 5% of single-use plastics are actually being recycled. Speaking for a moment personally, I recently find myself in a rural area, and I'm just amazed at how difficult it is to access actually taking my glass bottles, try not to use plastic, but maybe there's one here in between, and recycling it. So the commitment is there. Your purchasing power, having that is helping to scale things being able to be made more sustainably, affordably. And then hopefully we can all work together with the access hurdles. And Tania, there's something so exciting that Nike's been working on, and I was wondering, and it ties into circularity and innovation. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. You know, it's really interesting, something also that Stuart shared about a lot of times when you talk about claims that you're making, right? Everyone kind of jumps and talks about the things that you're not doing. And we've been really making choices to make more sustainable product for a long time, and not always spoke publicly about it, right? Using recycled polyesters in products, like switching to organic cotton. There are lots of things that we've been doing. About 10 years ago, we came out with Flyknit, which is a fully knit upper for footwear, and zero waste, right? So that was really game-changing. And
I have a pair of those things.
yeah, and they're really comfortable too, right? Yeah, so it's like, you know, it's almost like a custom fit feel. And so what I'm wearing is Nike's latest innovation platform in apparel called Nike Forward, and it is about pushing the world forward in the name. And it's a really game-changing innovation, and it's not a knit or a woven, but it's created by needle punching fabric together. We hacked some machines from the auto industry, probably came out of Detroit, you know, to use it in a different way. And so you take out, you know, the spinning of the yarns, the creation of the yarns, like how we're cutting the material. There are no dyes in the product. Very minimal trims. The material is very structural, so that's really where you get the shape and the form. And you know, really thinking through how we can start to address some of our most precious resources, right, materials. And we know that the apparel industry is one of the biggest offenders of creating waste, and it really is in material choice where that starts. So not only looking at recycled materials, you know, as we have in lots of brands in the industry have been looking at a long time, but how are we being innovative with the scraps that are left behind, and how are we creating new materials? And we started with some of the most classic love pieces, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, and if you think about what it takes to create a fleece piece, we've reduced the carbon input, the carbon footprint, you know, by more than half in creating a piece out of Nike Forward in this platform versus a traditional fleece garment.
This is huge because, you know, I think for most brands, materials, number one offender of where impact is coming from environmentally. In fact, I think it's like 90% of CO2 can be traced to material choices alone. So the opportunity that you have with Nike to actually invent a whole new way of making a whole new material that's circularity. I mean, that's just what we need. We need to not only innovate within the way we design and the materials we use, but also just the whole system.
Yeah, and a lot of it is respecting the material in the way that it is. A lot of times we create more sustainable materials and try to then submit it into a different, you know, the traditional hoodie. But like I said, this is very sculptural, and how do you work with the limitations of the material? And also, you know, it has slash-cut pockets. It's minimal trim so that it can be fully circular and that you can turn it back into a garment when you're through with it versus discarding it. And, you know, I think that, you know, our athletes are telling us that climate change is important to them as well, right? It's impacting their ability to be their best at what they do. If we don't have clean air for people to go and run and enjoy, you know, the outdoors and participate in sport, it's even part of protecting that, right, for the people on the planet. And I don't think you can talk about diversity and inclusivity and care about people and not care about the planet that they live on.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, people of color are most adversely impacted by climate change.
Yes. Yep. So true.
But I think, like, fashion has an incredible opportunity to be a co-conspirator in the eradication of climate disaster, right? Because we do create so many things. And so I think when we think about this whole idea of, like, what does it mean to be sustainable, at least in my own life, I think about it and I'm like, okay, if I do this, then it will be less bad, right? We've talked about this when I was like much younger. Sarah and I have known each other for 9 years. So like 9 years ago, it was really about less bad, like trying to make things be less bad. And it's like, how do we accelerate from less bad, right, to actually being good? So when we think about, okay, we need to pull carbon out of the air at an insane speed. Totally possible, by the way, because if we spend as much money as we just did on the pandemic on climate change, we will be able to solve it, right?
Yeah, and they make diamonds from that, right? Yeah.
A number of things. So we could solve it in diamonds if you really want to ball.
That's like one of the interesting outputs of like clearing carbon out of the air.
Totally. So my partner has a company that creates these gigantic machines that literally pull carbon out of the air. It's called direct air capture. So what do you then do with that carbon now that you've pulled it out of the air? We need people who are innovating on the material side to make this jacket out of carbon. Because then when we're buying something, we're increasing and pushing the demand for carbon to be pulled out of the air, right? So we need to start thinking along those lines, because if we can do that, if we can figure that out, fashion will far and away become part of the solution instead of where we are right now, which is like teetering and flirting with being part of the problem, perhaps.
And to that point, you know, I mean, what is design? Design is problem solving. And I think it's sad that our industry is sort of stuck in a where do we get started place instead of being energized and excited by the challenge. It's like, you know, there are so many ways to address this. And this jacket is made out of 70% recycled fibers. But we have to be inspired, and we have to be excited by the challenge. That's our job. And for an industry that's built on creativity, it's interesting how stuck we are in old ways. We're working that old playbook, and it's like it's so dead. It's so irrelevant, you know? And we're designers, we're creatives, we're innovators, and we should be up for this challenge. We should be excited by it. We should be, we should be leading instead of, dragging our heels, and it's really unfortunate. And, one thing I learned, with the fashion initiative at CFDA was there's so many ways to approach this because there is so much work to be done socially, environmentally, economically, and everyone can play a role. You don't have to take it all on. Like Stuart said, we just have to get started. You have to do something, and I think that if we all take it on as our responsibility and find the area that we're motivated to make a difference in, then we're all moving forward, But I think if you sort of are, hesitating and not sure where to begin, so you don't do anything.
Which is
That's
normal,
pitiful.
right? It's normal to have some apprehension about it.
But you have to get past it.
Right.
That's what we're in this industry to do.
And we also, by the way, have to be kinder and more forgiving of each other as well, right? Because no one's going to do change perfectly.
Nope.
I mean, I went through puberty, so I know how difficult change can be, right? That was messy, y'all. But, one thing that I always like to say is that stumbling is evidence of momentum, right? And if you're doing the work, you're going to mess up sometimes. But the question is, do you have allies to hold your hand in that process, to pick you up and be like, oh, that was probably not the right campaign, but let's keep going. You know what I mean?
It's a big concern for most companies doing it imperfectly and being called out. And, there's a whole lot of calling out, and there are a lot of judges sitting on the sideline who aren't in it. If you're not in this industry creating, manufacturing, distributing, but you're sitting on the sidelines criticizing how it's done, then there's something, very elemental or elementary about the process that you don't understand, So I think it is important, sometimes it's like, come over here with me and just be in it for a week with me to understand where the challenges are, and where we actually are innovating and making a difference. But I think we cannot be afraid. We can't be afraid to fail. We all have to try. We have to be a part of changing from the foundation how this industry operates.
Yeah, and understanding that it's even bit by bit, that's impactful, even if you're just doing a little bit at a time, and then what that is like at scale and how it starts to shift things and becomes the norm versus it being, this feeling that it's anti-establishment, right? So, yeah.
And 2 quick points on that. If I came to you and I was like, Tracy, here's this company, and every single bolt of fabric that they have in this place is made out of carbon that's been pulled out of the air, you would be like, amazing.
Yep.
I'm using it for so would Stuart, so would everyone, right? So some of it is just about the fact that innovation like that takes a lot of resources. So we also need to fund that kind of innovation, because a brand like Brother Vellies or your brand, Hope for Flowers, is not going to be able to afford that, right? So we also need government support to help pay for some of that innovation. And my last point to what you were saying is I absolutely agree with you as it pertains to calling out. And I think, what's so important for me is for people to understand that a lot of times, if you're a collaborative person, and at least in my experience, it's really not about calling out, it's about calling in. Because it's opportunity, right? It's opportunity for growth. It's opportunity for change. It's opportunity for allyship. And it's opportunity to take the journey together, because to your point, we just need to start walking down the path of change.
And to the point of allyship, we cannot do this as separate islands. I think, there's so much proprietary information in our industry, and, well, we can't share that information, blah, 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 blah. We will not make it with that attitude. I mean, if you've gotten over a hurdle and you've figured something out, it's your responsibility to share that information. I love some of the work that is being done at Ralph Lauren, and the idea is, to share that with the industry, how to, dye cotton in a way that is less damaging to the planet. It's like they've subsidized the development of this innovation to share it with the industry. So for each of us, we really have to step away from this whole idea of everything being proprietary. We have to move forward as a community that is interested in one common goal.
Yeah, I so agree. And Nike has produced an annual circularity guide for that very reason, to share with the industry ways that we can be more sustainable. I couldn't agree more.
And that's how the price comes down.
Yeah. Yep.
You all have my heart. Aurora, talking about the carbon economy in the future is like, it just gets me so excited. Air Company, they started with the air vodka, and now it's perfume, and now they're like prototyping jet fuel, and it's like, yes, that's what, innovation, it can be so exciting when you think about it that way. But again, you all make this sound so easy. And Tracy, I know for you, when you pivoted after 30 years with your namesake brand, you're like, I'm going to do things differently. How can, for anyone listening or with us today that is just trying to figure out how to take that first step, because we talk about incremental change being so incredibly important, can you take us back and in that moment of like, how did you just ignite those first steps and get started?
You know what? I was excited by the opportunity, and I'm really grateful that I was able financially to step away from my past business, which, it was contracting, it was getting smaller, and, the catalyst was really, my partners came to me one day and they said, we need to make 10,000 of this blouse and sell it to Costco for $10. And I sort of looked at them like, first of all, absolutely not. It goes against everything, not to be all Linda Evangelista, but I'm not like waking up to make a blouse to sell to Costco for $10. It wasn't even our core competency to be able to work that way. You know what I mean? And then they weren't even considering what that meant. For us to sell a blouse for $10, we would have to buy it from a factory for like $4. Who's making that? Okay, the sewer on that blouse would be getting like 25 cents. The textile would have to be the most offensive textile that you could find for less than $1. I mean, everything about it was so backward, and it made it so easy. And like the biggest argument I'd had with my partners to date was about that, and that was the catalyst for me. I was like, I'm out. I'm going to like kind of sit back and let this thing wind down so that I can step aside with grace and maintain the friendship. But I could not keep the smile off my face. The idea of being in charge of my own destiny again was extremely attractive. And the challenge of learning how to work more responsibly, the first few seasons were extremely hard. I was like, I had 5 textiles I could work with. I'm working with organic cotton and linen and, some Cupro and some Tencel. And it was like, I'm used to I'd go to Premier Vision and see all these amazing, innovative, beautiful, gorgeous fabrics, and I'd be so excited by them, and the collection was already done in my mind. And then I'm working in this smaller parameter, but the idea was to get back to everything I loved about this work, and if I had to make a pattern with my own hands, I had to, sit down and figure that out. And if I had to make a sample with my own hands, I had to make a sample. But I wanted that. I wanted that visceral experience. I wanted to get closer. I learned how to screen print by hand. I hadn't had that experience. A lot of things that as your business grows, you get separated from. And all of a sudden, you're separated from the parts you love the most. So having a smaller business and really being able to be a part of all the processes was very attractive to me. And, I had support in the industry, and, for our social ventures, our community mission, we have some foundational support. And it's been very important to have that support from the Kellogg Foundation and Ballmer and the Ford Foundation. That's how we have that bottom line security to really stick with our mission and to not veer to the left or to the right. I really have to be so careful in designing the collection, and I can't look at that glittery thing over there. Nobody likes sparkle and glitter more than I do, okay? I can't quite afford those, recycled sequins yet. But, I have to stay in my lane, and I'm someone who works pretty well with parameters. So it's been a blessing, really, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity.
Incredible. Aurora, you would...
Sure.
Yep. No, I felt like you were going to say something.
No, I was just in awe of Tracy, and I think, a pivot to follow your heart is kind of all what we want to do when things feel difficult, right? And you've done it in a really big way. Sometimes we can do it in smaller ways in our own life as well. For me, I've been really reevaluating how I shop, trying to figure out how I want to shop differently this holiday season even, right? Making sure I buy things from women and underrepresented communities and all of that jazz. So I've been pivoting my own consumer dollars. Yeah.
And that's exciting, though. Doesn't that sound like a great project? Like reanalyzing how you shop and how you want to gift. That's fun. Who wants to do it the same old way? Boring.
We have only a couple of minutes left, which is horrible because I wish we could continue and learn more from you. In closing, I'm wondering, could you share a bit, if you could look through a viewfinder, each of you, to the future, and where do you hope that we, meaning fashion, meaning as a community, can be, let's say, like 5 years from now, and what it might take to get there?
I'll start. I think a little bit piggybacking your last question and this one together. Yes, it's how we shop, right? So I think, right, there are a lot of great sites out there that, sell previously loved product. So I think it's good to maybe we go, to that space just as often as we go to, into a storefront or online to see like what's new, like I said, the new sparkly, shiny thing. I think it's also, we talked about how we care for our clothing. And we're also looking at the ratio between the more timeless, crafted, durable product to what's like seasonal and new and trend, right? And so I think thinking through, one, how we craft and make product to last longer, also with more sustainable materials. I think part of it has to do with, you touched on this, Aurora, sometimes our consumers' barrier to thinking like, why should it cost a little bit more to do so? So I'm hoping that 5 years from now, we don't look through that filter of, I can get a cheaper one, and so I'm gonna go that route, versus thinking through how you're spending your dollars, how you're voting with your dollars, understanding craft, know that you'll have it longer. And I'm sure we'll have new sources for materials. The public will have opened their aperture in terms of how they view beautiful and new. And Stuart also touched on this. As designers and problem solvers, we're really inspired by the world around us. What is important to the people that live in this world, what's important to our consumers, what's important to the youth, who are the change makers, right? And we are responding to that. And so we know it's important to our consumers out there that we think about sustainability, that we think about climate change. At Nike, we're one of the largest, if not the largest, apparel brand in our industry. And we can make changes at scale that, that hoodie that you buy every day that we sell, tons of units of, we can make such an impact on the world in terms of the waste, in terms of the carbon footprint, in terms of changing kind of the average person's mind around what sustainability looks and feels like.
Well, gosh. I mean, I really look at it from two sides. So at Brother Vellies, I mainly work in like tiny workshops in Italy and Mexico and Ethiopia. So for me, in 5 years, I just hope that those workshops are continuing to grow and thrive and, employ more people and continue to make incredible product, and that everyone in this audience enjoys them. And then two, I think just echoing what, you guys have both really been saying, all of you, about carbon innovation. I think for me, like, that's what I'm so excited about, is like really trying to drive demand for carbon to be pulled directly out of the atmosphere and utilized as products. So whether it's biofuel, whether it's fabric for clothing, and really just trying from a sustainability standpoint, like to have our partners at the Pledge and elsewhere, like really invest tangibly in that industry to make sure that we can all start, creating positive impact through our commercial endeavors.
And for the industry, and just in terms of what the world values and what we perceive success to look like, bigger is not always better. Okay, operating profitably and paying people their value is fantastic, and that is big enough. World domination is not the end goal, and it cannot be for every business. How much product do we need? There's already like billions of more items, probably just in Bentonville than we need and than we could ever use. So I think we have to start thinking about scale differently, and we have to start thinking about success differently, and we have to share those messages with young people so that they can kind of break that mold and look at what success means differently, because we have to solve our problem of overproduction and overconsumption. This overproduction is not sustainable. Even, purchasing too much of anything. Look at the stock market. I mean, just the way that we operate as people and the way we view business and success, we have to change that in order to save the planet. So, being profitable, being comfortable, paying people their value, this is success.
Tania, I can't say thank you enough. Please join me again for thanking these three incredible innovators for all that they do, all that you lead, and thank you, Crystal Bridges. And thank you, Crystal Bridges. I think, in closing, we think a lot of sustainability about the 3 R's, reduce, recycle, and so forth, but also here makes me think about reimagination, resilience, and regeneration. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you, everyone.